Hello there. I was looking for a topic for today's video when I noticed the Taliban trending on X, and I figured I'd find out what's going on. What's this all about? Turns out that they decided to ban windows to stop women being seen inside their homes. Yes, this is not satiric. They did that. Interesting, isn't it? I'm going to apologize if I sound a bit strange. I have a bit of a sniffles, the cold, but hopefully we can make this work. So, it appears the Taliban have banned windows that look onto areas where Afghan women could be seen inside their homes. Quote, seeing women working in kitchens, in courtyards, or collecting water from wells can lead to obscene acts, government spokesperson Zabihullah Mujahid posted on X on Saturday. Newsweek has contacted the Afghan Ministry of Foreign Affairs via email for comment. This is the latest move taken by the group in its repression of women since the US and its allies pulled out of Afghanistan in February 2020. The Taliban have taken multiple steps to walk back women's rights since taking over the country in August 2021, including banning education for girls beyond grade 6, banning women from universities, and most recently, banning women's voices and bare faces in public. So just stay in the home somewhere that you cannot be seen from the window at all times. I believe they are also against balconies. I saw it in some other article, where basically they are trying to ban balconies too. So what to know? The decree by the Taliban Supreme Leader Hibatullah Akhundzada, I'm sorry, I butchered these names, I'm sure, states that new buildings should not have windows that show the courtyard, kitchen, neighbors, well, and other places usually used by women, according to translation by France 24. Existing windows looking into such areas should be blocked with a wall or should have their views obstructed in some other way to avoid nuisances caused to neighbors. Earlier this month, the United Nations urged the Taliban to respect the rights of women in Afghanistan, warning that the future of the nation depends on safeguarding the rights of all its citizens. Meaning what? What are you gonna do to stop them? If they don't respect the rights of women, what are you gonna do? Nothing. Marking this year's International Human Rights Day, the UN mission in Afghanistan highlighted the importance of human rights and criticized the Taliban for fostering systemic discrimination, particularly against women and girls. Yeah, I know. And then what's going to happen is that next year we are going to once again have the entire Human Rights Commission for Women of the UN be composed mainly of countries that abuse the rights of women, mainly Islamic countries, and they will condemn Israel once again for its treatment of Palestinian women, I believe. That's what they do pretty much annually. And nobody's going to find it strange or hypocritical at all. I'm not saying that no one can criticize Israel. I'm saying that the countries that abuse women's rights the most, criticizing Israel, where women have far more rights than any Islamic country on the face of the planet, is hypocrisy, that's all. If people actually cared about women's rights, they wouldn't put these countries in charge of it, at least in the UN. So, what people are saying, Shabnam Nassimi, a former UK government policy advisor, said next on Saturday, 3+ years since Kabul fell and the world watches in silence for shame. I have news for her, it's going to continue the same way. Nobody's going to invade Afghanistan to save you from the Taliban. You're going to have to save yourself, if you can. In another post, she added, how much longer will the world stand by and watch? Pretty much forever, the way I see it. What happens next? Remains to be seen what the world's response to the movement will be. Newsweek contracted the Trump-Pence transition team via email for comment. The US and many other countries do not formally recognize the Taliban or any other entity as Afghanistan's government. In November, Russian lawmakers put forward a bill that could pave the way for the Taliban to be removed from the country's list of recognized terror organizations. So this is by no means a very influential and accepted government in the Western world. They are still categorized as terrorists, essentially. But that doesn't stop them from ruling and being a military powerhouse for their region, I suppose, because they are armed with only the best US equipment, courtesy of one Joe Biden. Sounds familiar? Ring a bell? Anyway, this is the BBC article from 11 September. Do realize that this issue is currently trending because the article I just read to you is from today. So this is a previous article on a similar vein. basically talking about the day they banned women's voices from the public square. They're talking here about women receiving English lessons, or, for example, learning to be midwives down the article. And they are basically saying that they have no rights and very little outlet in current Afghanistan. Saying things like, when I learned about new law, I decided not to attend the course for English anymore, because if I go out, I'll end up speaking and then something bad might happen. Maybe I won't return home safely, but then my mother encouraged me to continue. In the 3 years since the Taliban takeover, it's become clear that even if edicts aren't strictly imposed, people start self-regulating out of fear. Women continue to be visible in small numbers on the streets of cities like Kabul, but nearly all of them now are covered from head to toe in loose black clothes or dark blue burqas, and most of them cover their faces with only their eyes visible, the impact of a decree announced last year. Every moment you feel like you're in a prison, even breathing has become difficult here, said Nausheen, an activist. Until last year, whenever new restrictions were announced, she was among small groups of women who marched on the streets of Kabul and other cities demanding their rights. The protests were violently cracked down on by the Taliban's forces on multiple occasions until they stopped altogether. Nausheen was detained last year. The Taliban dragged me into a vehicle, she's saying. Why are you acting against us? They asked. This is an Islamic system. They took me to a dark, frightening place and held me there, using terrible language against me. They also beat me, she says, breaking down into tears. When we were released from detention, we were not the same people as before, and that's why we stopped protesting. She adds, I don't want to be humiliated anymore because I'm a woman. It is better to die than to live like this. End quote. So, things are definitely not looking great, unfortunately. I very much feel for them. I also wonder, is it a good idea to allow lots and lots and lots of these people into the West? I mean, you're already starting to see Muslims organize into essentially their own political parties in the UK. I can't help but wonder, how long until they want Islamic law there? Because if you actually ask the leaders, they say they want Islamic law. And if you actually poll the immigrants, the Muslim ones, they say they want Islamic law. So isn't it only a matter of time, considering you bring them in very quickly and they also reproduce very quickly, and you have negative reproduction rate for the indigenous white population? Aren't you going to end up with the same Sharia law in Britain just a couple of decades later? Seems to me as though feminism is bringing about its own end by completely destroying the relationship between men and women because it went way too far. So as well, there's no kids, and there's open borders, because if you look at the map of any Western country, if only women voted, it would be all left-wing. And if men voted, it would be right-wing, usually. So the people opening the borders seems to be the same people who wouldn't want to live in this manner the most, to me. Not that I think any Western person wants to live under Sharia, obviously. But this sort of lack of logic and sense, I could never settle in my head, other than they've been told that Muhammad was the first feminist and that Islam is a feminist religion. These are not jokes. This is actually what the left teaches in universities. Just going to put it out there. So, now Afghan women are showing their dissent by posting videos of themselves online, their faces covered, singing songs about freedom. Quote, let's become one voice, let's walk together holding hands and become free of this cruelty, are the lines of one such song. I'm going to predict right here that these songs are going to have absolutely zero effect on the Muslim leaders. Taliban government deputy spokesman Hamdullah Fitrat, who didn't want to be pictured with a woman or sit directly opposite me, I presume that the person who wrote this article is a woman, justified the new edict, which came accompanied with copious footnotes, references to religious sects. Quote, the law approved by the Supreme Leader is in accordance with Islamic Sharia law. Any religious scholar can check its references, he says. Shirin, a teacher, does not agree. Quote, this is their own interpretation of Sharia. Islam has given the right to both men and women to choose if they want to study and progress. If they say that women's voices should not be heard, let's go back to history. There are so many women in Islamic history who have spoken out. Well, that's her interpretation. They don't seem to care. Shirin is part of a network of Afghan women running secret schools, quietly rebelling against the restrictions. Already operating under a great deal of risk, often having to move the location of the school for safety. The new law has compounded her fears. The danger of discovery is so great she cannot speak to us at home, instead choosing a discreet location. Quote, every morning I wake up asking God to make the day pass safely. When the new law came, I explained all its rules to my student and told them things would be more difficult. I'm so tired of all of this, sometimes I just want to scream, she says. They don't see women as human beings, just as tools whose only place is inside the home. Karina, a psychologist who consults with a network of secret schools, has previously told us that Afghan women are suffering from a pandemic of self-ending thoughts because of the restrictions against them. After the new law was announced, she says she had a surge in calls asking for help. Quote, a friend of mine messaged me one day to say this was her last message. She was thinking of ending herself. They feel all hope is gone and there is no point in continuing living, she said. It's becoming more and more difficult to console them. Well, they asked the spokesperson from the Taliban's government about women and girls in their country, and they say this. Our sisters' education is an important issue. We're trying to resolve this issue, which is the demand of a lot of our sisters, the spokesman said. But 3 years on, do they really expect people to believe them? Quote, we are awaiting a decision from our leadership. When it is made, we will all be told about it, he replied. From earlier meetings with Taliban officials, it has been evident for a while that there are divisions within the Taliban government on the issue of women's education, with some wanting it to be restarted. But the Kandahar-based leadership has remained intransigent, and there have been no public breaking of ranks with the supreme leader's diktats. We've seen some evidence of the differences in views not far from Kabul. We were unexpectedly given access to a midwife training course regularly run by the Taliban's public health ministry. It was underway when we visited, and because ours was a last-minute visit, we know it was not put on for us to see. More than a dozen women in their 20s were attending the course being conducted by a senior female doctor. The course is a mix of theory and practical sessions. The students couldn't speak freely, but many said they were happy to be able to do this work. Quote, my family feels so proud of me. I have left my children at home to come here, but they know I'm serving the country. This work gives me so much positive energy, said Sophia. Many acknowledged their privilege, and some expressed fear about whether even this might be stopped eventually. Taliban's health ministry didn't answer questions about how they would find students to do this course in the future if girls were not receiving formal education after grade 6. Well, I guess they'd stop it. Public health, security, arts, and craft are among a handful of sectors where women have been able to continue working in parts of the country. But it isn't a formal decree that gives them permission. It's happening through a quiet understanding between ground-level Taliban officials, NGOs, and other stakeholders involved. The new law leaves even this informal system vulnerable to the scrutiny of the Taliban's morality police. And that's about the previous law banning women's voices in public. Now that they ban windows from women, it's going to be interesting if they can continue. Definitely, there's going to be a tightening of the laws until essentially women have no rights or freedoms whatsoever in Afghanistan. From my view, that's how they're going. And they basically say this is our holy textbook commanding us to do so, so we are just going to keep going and ignore you. And that's incidentally what they answered to the international community and Western states when they were criticized over it. You can go and read the rest of the article on the BBC if you like. So, what exactly do you think about this? Are we not giving these problems enough credence, do you think, when we're discussing immigration or even women's rights? Focusing on microaggressions and things like mansplaining and manspreading and all sorts of other nonsense in the West, while honestly these sort of issues are sort of past their expiration date nowadays. A couple of years ago they were in vogue. Now it's all about the trans and rainbow people instead. But I still feel the entire thing is a circus, and there are far worse things happening to people in third world countries that we are told not to criticize because it would be racist and colonialist of us to do so. Instead, we should import these people, but not demand that they learn our language or acclimatize to the culture. Instead, we should just leave them as is, allow them to form communities where they gather according to their race, religion, and so on, and practice their own views. So you may well find communities in Britain, in France, in Germany, that are no-go zones for the police or other government services, where women are treated exactly the same as in Afghanistan, And this is fine according to the left somehow. But at the same time, we're all sexist because we don't think it's a good idea to keep favoring women in education, for example, where they're already the overwhelming majority. I see. I honestly don't know what's going to happen with Europe because they don't seem to be self-correcting, unlike the US, which has shown some promising signs. I don't want to see women oppressed, I just want equality. But the more they try to overcorrect and get vengeance on men for thousands of years of oppression that we didn't do because we didn't live back then, and they didn't suffer because they didn't live back then, the more they're going to bring forward the moment of their own oppression by the new Islamic leaders. But I guess until the boot is on their neck, they won't notice. And perhaps they will manage to postpone it enough to live out their natural lifespan before it happens, leaving their daughters and granddaughters to suffer in their stead, which would be tragic, because it would be absolutely undeserved. Still a vie, I guess this is life, and there's not much I can do about it other than try and bring this to your attention and hope that people get up in arms about it and try and demand change in both the way we do our foreign policy, NGOs and the like, the UN, as well as in immigration, and of course our own policies to try and heal the wounds between men and women so we can put up a united front and advance forward. Thanks for watching, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.